It's me, Mario!
Hello everyone, Snow is Random here, and today I will be going over a topic that has started to take my interest lately. As the spooky season rolls around, I have found myself coming across countless eerie videos on YouTube, unsettling finds, and all pertaining to video game lore, which is something I fawn over in my free time. More than just standard creepypastas, but I had come across videos I missed by months. Iceberg videos covering the lore and secrets of games from my youth. More particularly, the Super Mario 64 iceberg that I have taken the most interest in. That game, while I never played the original, but instead the DS version, was an important and memorable part of my childhood. I can recall sitting in a hospital bed when my little brother was sick, watching him play on our mother's DS so he would stop crying. I remember him going through Bob-omb Battlefield, where we could barely read, but we called them Bob-ombs instead. I remember him deleting our older sister's 150-star save file and getting so mad that she tossed the game to us to keep when we got our own DS's, and I began my own journey to collect them all back for her, only to reach just 98 or so. I was 6 at the time, and new with my DS, let alone my puzzle-solving skills were not up to par yet. Nevertheless, Super Mario 64 was still something I looked back to from time to time. When a friend in school brought it up to the N64, or the DS version, I would be there to chime in as we would recall a fraction of our childhood only to come out with different recollections, especially the fears we had. Far beyond the anxiety of boss fights, creatures throughout the game like the giant eel in Jolly Roger's Bay, the mad piano located in Big Boo's haunt, and even the eyeballs that followed you on the same map and a few others. Those were my greatest fear as a child playing Super Mario 64, but never could I recall the fears of others. The Bubbas, the killer chair, even minuscule enemies I don't recall at all, but when I search the name to this day, I see that they were in some way, shape, or form, part of the game. Even the remake. Maybe I just don't see these creatures as threats? Thus why I don't remember them? I chalked it up to my childhood memories failing me. It had to be. Until I came across the Super Mario 64 iceberg. My childhood memories came flooding back, and an answer to not just a lifelong question for myself, but for everyone was answered. What causes certain moments in Super Mario 64 to come off as scary or memorable as opposed to other moments others feel? Each copy of Super Mario 64 is personalized. Now this isn't brand new news. I'm actually extremely late to the party when it comes to covering this topic, though I've stumbled across some points and evidence that I'm surprised no one else has noticed. If someone has in another video, please comment on who has below. Feel free to tell me if I sound nuts also, but this is something I've been studying for a while like the journalist I am. This theory of all Super Mario 64 copies being personalized to their respective players is tied in with so many other points on the iceberg, but the few that support my claim here today are the wet, dry world negative feelings claims. The same course as possible relation to a brain, and the July 29th, 1995 build. Do not research. Well, I was never one to listen to orders, let alone something someone tells me online. Look where it has gotten me now. To sum up the July 29th, 1995 build, it is a beta version of Super Mario 64 before it could even be called a Mario game. Supposedly made by an outside source to test a new AI, one that would read the player's actions and choices, their play styles and their motor function through gameplay and use it to personalize the game to suit the player's certain experience. This build was then sold to Nintendo where they would make it into the game we know and love today. It is uncertain what exactly is within the build as no one has truly stepped forward with the proper evidence. Some can only tell by word of mouth that this build was horribly bugged, glitchy, could cause seizures, and was much more malicious than intended. Peach's castle had very little to it, as going up was simply a staircase that led to a single room, but beneath the surface in the basement was a labyrinth used to test the AI. The playtesters were subjected to its actions as it learned what their desires were and quickly adapted. It is said one of the playtesters had played for an incredibly long time, that they had reverted to a crazed and unstable state where they were then hospitalized. Playtesters were then urged from then on to not enter the basement. Like I said before, there isn't much news on the build itself, but what's inside isn't exactly what I'm trying to use as evidence. With very little information on the build, it only leaves us with a few images. This build was theorized to exist before the N64 was patented, 4 or so months prior to be exact. Images from the original 1995 build were used to show off the N64, known as the Ultra 64, and its ability to project 3D images, claiming to revolutionize the video game world, to take it where it had never dreamed before, said within the patent itself, which will also be linked below.
People's imaginations are fueled by visual images. What we actually see at sunset, what we dream at night, the pictures we paint in our mind when we read a novel. All of these memorable scenes are composed of visual images. Throughout history, people have tried to record these images with pencils, paint, or videotape. But only with the advent of the computer can we begin to create images with the same vividness, detail, and realism that they display in the real world or in the imagination.
This was Nintendo's mission statement, to create something that was able to display as much realism as possible. Was that why they took interest in the 1995 beta build of Super Mario 64? To gain an upper hand and to change the world forever? If that's the case, what did they use from the original build to do so? In Super Mario 64, Wet Dry World is the 11th course within the game, and to many, it is one of the most unsettling levels of all time. Even more so than some of Bowser's levels or King Boo's haunt. Wet Dry World bases its mechanics on very slow and tedious steps, raising and lowering water levels, avoiding many enemies you cannot kill, and when failing platform sections, you need to tread back to the start and repeat the whole process over. That is the basis of it on the surface, and I can recall hours spent on end as a child who had had issues facing the feat of getting all stars in the course. Though many times I would find myself standing on top of a high spot acknowledging how the skybox looked underwater, like when you submerge yourself in water and stare up to see distorted light from above become warped from passing through the water. It wasn't until I took notice in the city surrounding me. I was in the city, flooding and draining it. Why was there a city underwater? This was a city with all these abnormal creatures and floating blocks? How? That answer was soon solved as I was snooping around and messed with the levels enough to find a pipe leading down to a lower section where the true Atlantis was discovered. As a child, it didn't all exactly click with me, though what I did know was that this gave an unsettling and uncanny feeling, as if I was in a city with trees and flowers, though not a single intelligent soul inhabited this lower area. It was abandoned, forgotten. To many, this course was annoying, but to me it was unsettling and made me feel anxious. Even as a 6-year-old, a first grader, I was feeling a feeling I couldn't even pinpoint at the time. All I knew was that I wanted out. I would try to hop the walls out of the map, and for a long time I would even avoid it. Wet Dry World was not a fear, but simply ominous and left me feeling as if it held a much darker meaning. As I started to research more about Super Mario 64 not-so-kind backgrounding, especially taking time to examine the iceberg, seeing the claim of Wet Dry World having a negative emotional aura hit close home for me. It reminded me of those days and a wave of anxiousness that I could now name. Though another point made on the iceberg was the claim of Wet Dry World relating to the human brain, whether through an asset within the game's files being the picture of a brain or the level itself acting as a functioning brain. I believe that is what causes the uneasy and disturbing feeling, along with the tedious work needing to be done on the level, and the creatures all being inorganic, which helps it run like clockwork. Either or, a brain is used to send signals elsewhere in a body to tell it to act so. What's the body of this brain? So, the eerie feelings, the mission statement of Nintendo, Wet Dry World's brain-like function, and the possibility of an AI at work to personalize every game. What do these exactly have to do with each other? Well, it ties back to my first claim, how every copy is personalized, and it comes with an even greater piece of evidence from the man himself.
The best hardware, Nintendo 64, we can change the image of game.
Which means?
We can make the quite different game from current game. Like the game itself always changes with players playing.
And 64 having the best hardware, changing the world of gaming. And the game itself always changes with the players playing. This is what I can put together, and it branches off at some point, so stay with me. It goes far deeper than we could even imagine. Super Mario 64 does have an AI that personalizes the game within to appeal to the player. This was Nintendo's goal from the beginning, not only to create a game that would appeal to almost everyone, but to put it on their newest and most groundbreaking device, to achieve their goal and project the imagination of those who played their games. Wet Dry World acted as its brain and would take in how you reacted to it, if you were fearful, curious, unfazed, and would continue to personalize your game as such. At the time, technology was young, and so it wouldn't be surprising how in this day and age we can pinpoint the flaws. How the game is creepy. How could you not see this before? Though, what if there's more that we don't realize? Remember at the beginning, how I never played the N64 version of Super Mario 64, but the DS remake instead? Yet the feeling I felt in Super Mario 64 DS was the same as those who played Super Mario 64 on the N64. Super Mario 64 DS was the first game bundled with the new system in 2004, where the DS was used to save Nintendo as Sega, Atari, and Sony were trying to beat out the company. Sony was the only one to strike fear in Nintendo as they scrambled to save their company if the PSP launched. Sony would gain the upper hand in sales, and Nintendo would be doomed. They needed something new. They needed to appeal once again, so they turned to their past. Super Mario 64. I'm not claiming to say that this game once again was personalized and reused the same AI, but the difference between technology in 1995 to 2004 would make sense. Barely a decade had passed, but technology was fast evolving. Artificial intelligence was not much a stretch, especially if they had a head start on implementing it into their newer game, with a much grander interface. That, and this allowed Nintendo to collect how to appeal to the newer generation. Gen Zs were now being born and would grow up differently than their previous market of millennials would. They needed a way to appeal to them as they would grow up so their company would continue to thrive. All it would take is some code, and keeping their lips extremely shut. If this is the case, if Super Mario 64 for the N64 and the DS are both personalized to appeal to the players to their respective consoles, then how can we be so sure that Nintendo hasn't done this elsewhere? No one pointed out Super Mario 64's concerning features until over 20 years after the fact. Maybe there is more to games that we don't realize, who run similar AIs to keep us intrigued by the game. Especially in 2020, when all an AI needs to do is run some code to know how we work as an entire human being, down to your darkest secrets. Like how I made the video? This isn't my usual style, but I wanted to make something relatively creepy for the Halloween season. This has taken a lot of work, and I wanted to make something nice for you all. Tell me down below what you enjoyed the most about this video, and don't be afraid to like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this in the future. Also, tell me what games you think may hold deeper and darker secrets like personalizing AIs that have not been revealed to the public eye. And with all of that, I'll see you later. Ciao.